People always say that if someone loves you, they won't hurt you. But nobody ever tells you what to do when the person who hurt you the most was the one you loved hardest. Nobody ever prepares you for the moment you realize that all those years you spent pouring yourself empty, every sacrifice, every silent night, every prayer you said for someone who didn't even deserve your name on their lips, none of it meant anything. And the worst part? The absolute worst part is that you still didn't leave. You stayed. You stayed until staying almost killed who you were. That was me. And before this story takes you completely apart, make sure you're subscribed because we drop new stories every week and you do not want to miss anyone. I am Ryland Bark, and I used to believe in soulmates. I believed in them the way a child believes in something they've never actually seen but feel deep in their bones, completely, without question, without room for doubt. I believed that Tony was mine. I believed that when the pact bond settled over us on our mating night, fate had finally smiled at me. I was 22, and I thought I had won the greatest prize in the world. I was 27 when I realized I had been paying for a game I never agreed to play. Tony was charming. That's the thing about people like him. They have to be charming, because if they weren't, you'd see through them too fast, and they'd lose their power over you. He had this way of walking into a room and making you feel like you were the only one in it. He laughed at the right moments. He held your hand in public. He said things like, "You're everything to me, Ryland," with such a straight face that you'd feel guilty for ever doubting him. But behind closed doors, things were different. It started small, the way things like this always do. A sharp word here, a canceled plan there, a dismissal wrapped in a joke so that if you got upset, you were the one being too sensitive. Then it grew. The sharp words became sharper. The canceled plans became a pattern. The jokes stopped being jokes and started being the truth dressed up in something he could take back if he needed to. He stopped coming home on time. Then he stopped explaining why. I cooked, I cleaned, I managed the household while holding down my own job as a junior accountant at a small firm downtown. I made sure his shirts were pressed, his dinners were warm, and his moods were managed. I swallowed every hurt and told myself it was love. I told myself good mates didn't give up when things got hard. I told myself Tony was stressed, Tony was overwhelmed, Tony needed my patience. But what Tony actually needed was someone to keep looking the other way while he did whatever he wanted. The maid's name was Petra. She had been working for us for 8 months when I started noticing the shift. Not between Tony and Petra, not at first. It was the way Petra started looking at me, like she knew something I didn't, like she was deciding whether to pity me or enjoy it. I told myself I was imagining things. Then, one afternoon, I came home early from work with a migraine that felt like someone was pressing a hot iron behind my eyes, and the house was quieter than it should have been. Too quiet. A specific kind of quiet that presses down on your chest before you even know why. I didn't go looking for anything. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't suspicious. I was just a man who came home sick and wanted to lie down. But fate, apparently, had decided I'd been kept in the dark long enough. I heard them laughing. That's the detail nobody ever talks about when they discover a betrayal. They always focus on the shock, the anger, the tears. But what broke something in me first, something I couldn't name and couldn't get back, was the laughing. Easy, warm, familiar laughing, the kind Tony used to share with me. I stood outside the door to our bedroom, and my whole body went cold from the inside out. My hands were steady. That scared me more than anything. You'd think in that moment everything would shake, your hands, your voice, your legs, but I just stood there, very still, very cold, feeling something quietly die inside my chest like a candle going out in a room no one was watching. I didn't open the door. I went back downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the wall for a very long time. That night, Tony came home like nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek, he complained about traffic, he asked what was for dinner, and God help me, I made him a plate. Weeks passed. I told myself I'd misunderstood. I am ashamed of that now, but I need you to understand what kind of state a person can get into when they've spent years being told their own perceptions are wrong. You start to doubt your own eyes. You start to think, maybe I misheard, maybe I imagined the tension, maybe I'm just broken and paranoid and this is my fault somehow. But then Petra stopped hiding it. She started showing up in rooms I was already in and not leaving. She started answering questions Tony directed at me. She stopped saying sir and started saying Ryland with this small, deliberate smile that had no warmth in it at all. And when I brought it up to Tony one evening, carefully, without accusation, the way I'd learned to bring up everything with him, he laughed. He actually laughed. "You're jealous of the help?" he said, and there was something in his eyes that wasn't amusement. It was something much colder. "Come on, Ryland, don't embarrass yourself." I didn't sleep that night. And then came the phone call. Tony didn't know I could hear him. He was out on the back porch, and our kitchen window was cracked open the way it always was in spring, and his voice carried the way voices do when someone thinks they're alone. He was talking to someone, a friend, I think, and he was laughing again, that easy laugh, and I was washing dishes with the water running low so it wouldn't mask the sound. "Ryland?" he said, in answer to whatever the other person had asked. Then he paused, and I heard him take a breath that sounded more like a shrug. "Nah, don't worry about Ryland. He loves me too much, you know? He'd never actually leave. Even if he found out everything, he'd cry, he'd be upset for a week, and then he'd still be here making my dinner. That's just who he is." The dish in my hands didn't fall. My hands were steady again, that horrible steadiness I was starting to hate. He'd never actually leave. 5 words. 5 words, and they rearranged something in my spine. I turned off the tap, I dried my hands, I went upstairs and I sat on the edge of our bed and I thought for a very long time about who I had become and whether I recognized him. I did not. He came home 3 days later from what he called a work trip. He had a tan and a relaxed energy, and he tossed his bag by the door like a man without a care in the world. And before he could say a single word, before he could kiss my cheek or ask what was for dinner or laugh that laugh that I now understood was never really from me, I handed him the papers. Divorce papers. I had spent those 3 days being very, very quiet and very, very busy. He stared at them. Then he stared at me, and for the first time in 5 years I saw real surprise on Tony's face, not the performed kind, the actual kind, because he had genuinely believed what he told his friend. He had genuinely believed I would never leave. "Ryland," he started. "Petra is pregnant," I said. It wasn't a question. I had known for 2 weeks. I had found the test in the bathroom bin, and I had put it back, and I had said nothing, and I had filed those papers, and I had waited. "Sign them, Tony." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I can explain," he tried. "Sign them." He did, and I walked out of that house with 2 suitcases, a car I had paid for myself, and the very specific, very quiet feeling of someone who had finally stopped drowning and wasn't sure if they were going to float or sink. I drove 4 hours north to a city called Marinevale. I had never been there before. That was the point. I got a small apartment above a bookshop on a street that smelled like rain and old paper. I got a new job, a better one, senior accountant at a mid-sized firm that paid me what I was actually worth. I joined a small local pack, the Marinevale pack, but kept mostly to myself. I told people I was a widower when they asked, because it felt closer to the truth than "my husband cheated with our maid and I finally grew a spine." The first year was hard. Not dramatically hard, not movies and crying hard, just a quiet, gray, persistent kind of hard. The kind where you wake up and for 3 seconds everything is fine, and then you remember, and the remembering is its own small wound every single morning. But I kept going. I kept working. I sent money to my younger brother Melvin, who was finishing university. I learned to cook things I actually liked instead of things Tony preferred. I stopped managing anyone's moods but my own. By the 2nd year, I was doing more than surviving. I had made real money, enough to invest, enough to feel something like solid ground under my feet for the first time. I had made one good friend, a beta woman named Claudette who worked at the bookshop below my apartment and who had the loudest laugh I had ever heard and absolutely no filter on anything she said. She became the kind of friend who texted you at 2 a.m. with links to very strange news articles and remembered your coffee. She remembered the way you took everything, the important things. By the third year, I had stopped hurting every day. Love, though, love was something I had quietly, firmly put in a box, taped it shut, and pushed it to the back of a high shelf. I didn't need it. I had proven I could live without it. And more than that, I had proven that I was bad at choosing it, that my instincts were broken in that particular area, that whatever inside me reached for someone and called them home was not to be trusted. So I stopped reaching. The business conference was not my idea. My firm's managing director, a small, intense woman named Haruko, had pushed a folder across my desk in late October and said, "You're going, Ryland. You've been hiding in spreadsheets for 3 years. Go network, shake hands, remind yourself there are people in the world." "I know there are people in the world," I said. "Then go look at them," she said, and that was the end of the discussion. The conference was held at a hotel in the city center, 3 days of panels and breakout sessions, and that specific kind of forced socializing that makes introverts want to crawl under their chairs. I wore a charcoal blazer and my most professional face and told myself I was there to learn things and maybe collect some business cards, and absolutely nothing else. The first day was fine, uneventful in the best way. The second day was when everything changed. I was at the afternoon networking event, a standing around with drinks situation that I was already planning an exit strategy for. The room was loud with overlapping conversations, and someone had put on jazz music that kept skipping, which was irritating in a very small but persistent way. I had a glass of sparkling water in my hand because I wasn't drinking, and I was half listening to a panel discussion about regional tax structures and mentally composing an email I needed to send on Monday. And then someone bumped into me from the left. Not a small bump, a full, solid collision, the kind that happens when someone turns without looking and walks directly into another person who was standing perfectly still, minding their own business, doing nothing to deserve this. The glass of sparkling water left my hand. It did not hit the floor. It hit the man who had just walked into me. Full, square in the chest, the water spreading across the front of his white shirt in a way that was, objectively, quite dramatic. There was a beat of absolute silence between us. I started apologizing before I had even fully processed what happened. "I'm so sorry, I didn't. You came out of. I'm sorry. Here." I was already reaching for the napkin from my other hand, which I had been holding for no particular reason, and which now felt like fate mocking me by being immediately useful. "It's fine," said a voice. I looked up. He was tall, not in a way that felt theatrical or designed to intimidate, just tall the way some people simply are, like their body had decided to keep going when most people stopped. He had a face that was somehow both sharp and warm at the same time, dark eyes that were watching me with a kind of calm that felt entirely out of place for someone who had just been drenched with water in a professional setting. His black shirt, he had been holding his blazer over his arm, which is the only reason it wasn't destroyed, was soaked. He looked like he had absolutely no feelings about this whatsoever. "It's really not fine," I said, still pressing the napkin uselessly against his shirt. "You've completely ruined your. You didn't move into me. I moved into you. So technically this is entirely my fault, and you should probably stop apologizing." He paused, glancing down at the napkin I was still pressing against his chest, then back at my face. "Also, that napkin is paper. It's making it worse." I looked at the napkin. He was correct. It was disintegrating. I dropped it. "Right." "Dexter sung," he said and extended his hand. I stared at it for half a second, at the steadiness of it, the unhurried way he offered it, like a man who was never rushed by anything. Then I shook it. "Ryland Bark." "Ryland Bark," he repeated like he was filing it somewhere. "You're with Haruko's firm." "You know Haruko?" "She's terrifying and brilliant, and I respect her enormously," he said, and the corner of his mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile but was adjacent to one. "I should go change, but it was good to run into you, Ryland Bark." He said my name again. I noticed that. Quite literally. He turned and walked away, and several people nearby who had watched the whole thing turned back to their own conversations, and I stood there holding a disintegrated paper napkin and feeling for the first time in 3 years like something had just shifted in the room without my permission. I didn't like that feeling. I put it away and went back to thinking about my email. Except he was at dinner that evening. Not just at dinner, he was seated at the table directly to my left, with 3 other people between us and a very loud conversation happening between them, and I kept my eyes on my food and my own table, and told myself the fact that I had noticed him immediately upon sitting down meant absolutely nothing. Claudette, when I texted her about it that night in my hotel room, sent back, "Water on the shirt is literally the universe screaming at you, Ryland." I put my phone face down. Day 3 of the conference, and he was at the morning session I had almost skipped. He was seated 3 rows ahead of me and slightly to the right, and he didn't turn around, and I spent 45 minutes telling myself I was focused on the presenter who was explaining something about cross-regional investment frameworks that I would normally find genuinely interesting. At the coffee break, the actual coffee break with the good pastries, he appeared beside me at the table. "The presenter lost me at slide 12, he said, reaching past me for a cup with the kind of ease that suggested he had no concept of personal space as an uncomfortable thing, just as a neutral fact about where people stood. The framework was solid, but the case studies were from 2019. "Slide 9 for me," I said. "He cited a study that was disproven 2 years ago." Dexter Sung looked at me then, really looked, with an attention that was specific and direct and not performed. "You know the Larson study?" "I cited the replication failure in a report last year," I said. "It got me a promotion." Something happened in his expression, something that might have been impressed, except it was more honest than that. It was curious, real curiosity, the kind that doesn't dress itself up. "Who are you, Ryland Bark?" "A senior accountant with a very good memory," I said. I picked up my pastry. "Excuse me." I walked back to my seat and did not turn around. He found me after the closing session, outside the conference hall where I was waiting for a car to the train station. He walked out of the building and came directly toward me with the kind of purpose that made it clear he had known exactly where I was going to be, and I wondered briefly if that should concern me more than it did. "Are you in Marinevale?" he said, stopping in front of me. "Yes," I said. "So am I." He said it simply, like a fact he was offering rather than a hook he was setting. "I'm the alpha of the Marinevale pack." I stared at him. The Marinevale pack. My pack. The pack I had quietly joined and stayed on the edges of for 3 years, attending the minimum required gatherings, nodding to people, paying my dues, never asking anyone their rank because I genuinely did not care. "You're—" I started. "He's been away. 8 months in Seoul on a business matter. I got back 2 weeks ago." He looked at me steadily. "I didn't know you were a member." "I kept a low profile," I said. "I've noticed," he said. "You've been in the pack for 3 years, and this is the first time I've seen you." That was the point, I maybe said more honestly than I meant to. He nodded slowly, like that answer made complete sense to him, and he was deciding what to do with it. "My car is here. I can give you a lift to the station. I have a car coming." "Cancel it," he said, and then, before I could respond to the audacity of that, he added, "Or don't. That's your choice completely, but my car is faster and I'm going the same direction and I'd like to keep talking to you." The honesty of that stopped me. There was no game in it, no performance, just, "I'd like to keep talking to you," said plainly, by a person who seemed entirely comfortable with wanting things. My car notification pinged, delayed by 20 minutes. I canceled it. In the car, he didn't fill the silence immediately, and I noticed that. People who are nervous fill silence. People who are comfortable with themselves let it sit. We drove for 3 minutes before he said, without preamble, "How long have you been running from something?" I turned to look at him. "That's an aggressive question for a car ride." "I'm an aggressive person," he said, and then the corner of his mouth moved again in that not-quite smile. "But I mean it kindly. I can tell the difference between someone who's quiet because they're peaceful and someone who's quiet because they're protecting something. You're protecting something." "Most people are," I said. "True," he said, "but most people don't do it as deliberately as you." I looked out the window. The city moved past. Shops, lights, people on the street wrapped against the October chill. "I had a bad few years," I said finally. "I rebuilt. I'm fine now." "I believe you," he said. "I'm not saying you're not fine. I'm saying fine and closed are 2 different things." I didn't answer that. He didn't push. And somehow the silence after that was different from the silence before it. Warmer, maybe. or more honest, or just more real. When the car stopped at the station, I got out and turned back to thank him. He was already looking at me through the open window. "I'll see you at the pack gathering on Saturday," he said, not a question. "I don't usually go to those," I said. "I know," he said. I checked. And then the window went up and the car pulled away. And I stood on the pavement outside the train station with my overnight bag and the very specific, very unwelcome feeling of someone whose carefully maintained walls had just developed a crack. I didn't go on Saturday. I stayed home, reorganized my filing system, and told Claudette I was being mature and self-protective. She told me I was being a coward. I told her she didn't know the full story. She told me she knew enough. We argued for 40 minutes over text, and then she sent me a photo of a dog wearing a tiny suit, and we were fine. The following Wednesday, I came downstairs to the bookshop to return a book I had borrowed, and Dexter Sung was sitting in the armchair by the window, reading like he belonged there. Claudette behind the counter gave me a look that said I had absolutely nothing to do with this in a way that meant she had everything to do with it. "You didn't come Saturday," he said, not looking up from the book. "I had things to do," I said. "You reorganized your filing system," he said. "Claudette mentioned it." I looked at Claudette. She was suddenly very busy with a shelf behind her. "Claudette?" I said. "I don't know anything," she said to the shelf. Dexter closed the book. He looked at me then, direct, unhurried, entirely unashamed of being exactly where he was. "Sit down, Ryland." "I don't have to sit down," I said. "No, you don't," he agreed, "but I drove across the city because I wanted to see you, and you could at least give me 5 minutes before you run." I sat, not because he asked, because, and I was honest with myself about this even if I wasn't ready to say it out loud, part of me had been waiting all week for something to happen, and nothing had, and that had been its own particular torture. "Why did you drive across the city?" He thought about that. Not like he didn't know the answer, like he was deciding how much truth to put in it. "Because you're interesting," he said finally, and I don't say that lightly. I've met a lot of people. Most of them aren't particularly interesting. You are. "Because I knew about the Larson study," I said flatly. "Because you looked at me after the water incident and apologized like you had done something terrible when you had done nothing at all, and then you walked away before I could say anything else. And I spent the rest of that evening thinking about why someone would be that quick to take the blame for something that wasn't their fault." The bookshop was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a bus went past. "Old habit," I said. "I know," he said gently. "That's what interested me." He started showing up, not constantly, not in a way that crowded me, but steadily, the way someone plants something and comes back to water it without making a big event of it. He came to the bookshop twice a week. He texted occasionally, usually links to articles he thought I'd argue with, because he had figured out quickly that I had opinions and liked using them, and he seemed to enjoy the arguing more than the agreeing. He invited me to the pack gathering every week, and I went to exactly one, stood near the back, and left before the food. He did not comment on this. He just invited me again the following week. One evening, he showed up at the bookshop with 2 containers of takeout from a Thai place on Renner Street that I had mentioned once in passing. He didn't make it romantic. He just handed me one and said, "Claudette said you hadn't eaten since lunch," and sat down and opened his own container and started eating, and I sat across from him and ate, and we talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing, about his time in Seoul, about the investment strategy I was working on at my firm, about a true crime podcast Claudette had gotten us both addicted to, about the specific tragedy of people who keep too many plants and kill them all through kindness. At some point, I realized I was laughing, not politely, not performatively, genuinely laughing at something he said about his disastrous attempt to keep a cactus alive, and I hadn't laughed like that I couldn't actually remember how long. He was watching me when I stopped, with an expression I didn't have a word for. It was soft but not weak, warm but not eager, like he was witnessing something and was careful not to startle it. "What?" I said. "Nothing," he said. He looked back at his food. "You should laugh more. That's all." I looked away from him. My chest felt strange. I pushed the feeling down with both hands, metaphorically speaking, and firmly changed the subject to the true crime podcast. 6 weeks in, the pack gathered for what Dexter called just a dinner, no formality, just people eating. He personally texted me that it was casual enough that even I couldn't use the word overwhelming as an excuse, and I sent back 3 question marks because that felt accurate. I went. It was at his house, a converted warehouse on the quieter side of the city, open ceilings and warm lighting and mismatched furniture that looked like it had all been chosen by a person with very specific taste, rather than someone who had hired someone to do it. There were about 20 people, all members of the pack I had been vaguely aware of for 3 years, without actually knowing. I met Nelson, a beta who ran a mechanic shop and made the best jerk chicken I had ever eaten, and told me this without any prompting within 30 seconds of meeting me. I met twin Omegas named Quentin and Douglas, who finished each other's sentences and had exactly 0 patience for small talk, and spent most of the evening debating something about urban planning that I didn't fully understand, but enjoyed listening to. I met an older alpha named Rudy, who had been in the pack for 30 years, and who took one look at me and said, "You're the one Dexter keeps talking about," and then wandered away before I could ask any follow-up questions. Dexter, across the room, did not look embarrassed when I caught his eye. He just raised an eyebrow like, "Yes, and?" I stayed until the end of the dinner. I helped wash up. I didn't leave early. Walking home, it was only 4 blocks, the October air cool and sharp. I felt something I didn't want to feel. Something like belonging. Like maybe the box I had put love in and taped shut and pushed to the back of a high shelf had been vibrating quietly this whole time, and I had been telling myself it was the pipes. I texted Claudette, "I think I'm in trouble." She texted back, "Finally." The problem was that Tony called. Not the next day, a week after the dinner on a Tuesday morning while I was eating breakfast, the name on my screen a thing I hadn't seen in almost 3 years. My body did something before my brain caught up, went cold, went still, that old terrible steadiness. I let it ring out. He called again. I let it ring out again. He texted, "Ryland, we need to talk, please. I know I don't deserve this, but please just hear me out." I put my phone in a drawer and went to work. At lunch, Dexter texted, "Are you all right? You seem distant today." Yes, I can tell from a text. Don't ask how. I stared at his message for a long time. Then I typed, "Old ghost. I'm fine." And then, because he had been consistently honest with me and it felt wrong to be anything less, my ex called. He didn't respond immediately. When he did, it was just, "Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to send you something annoying to argue about?" I actually laughed. "Send me the annoying thing," I wrote back. He sent an article arguing that spreadsheets were making accountants intellectually lazy. I spent the next 3 hours composing an extremely detailed rebuttal and felt significantly better. Tony called 4 more times over the following 2 weeks. I didn't answer any of them, but I couldn't pretend the calls weren't doing something to me. Cracking open things I had carefully sealed, pulling up memories I had worked hard to grow past. Some nights I lay awake and thought about all the things I had given up for Tony. The job I had turned down in another city because he didn't want to move. The relationship with my older brother Jay that had gotten strained because Tony didn't like Jay's honesty. The version of myself I had slowly stopped being because that version had opinions and preferences and feelings, and those things were, apparently, inconvenient. I had worked so hard to get that version back. I did not want to be undone by a name on a screen. Dexter, somehow, without asking directly, understood that something was happening. He didn't crowd me. He just kept showing up. The takeout, the texts, a book he left on the counter at Claudette's shop with a note that said, "Thought you'd hate this. Prove me wrong." I read it in 2 days. I hated exactly 3 chapters and loved the rest. And my review text was so long that he called me instead of texting back, and we talked for an hour and a half. One afternoon, I was at the bookshop when he came in, and he must have seen something in my face, some weight I hadn't fully hidden, because he didn't say anything clever or pick up where we'd left off. He just pulled the chair close to mine and sat down and said quietly, "Tell me." I opened my mouth to say I was fine. "Ryland," he said, and the way he said it, patient, steady, present, just undid something. So I told him, not everything at once, not neatly, but I told him. About Tony, about the 5 years, about the maid, about the laughing, about the phone call where Tony had said I'd never leave, about the divorce papers and the drive north and the 2 suitcases, about deciding that love was something I had failed at and was better off without. He listened without interrupting. His face didn't do anything dramatic, no visible horror, no performed outrage. He just listened, and when he stopped, he was quiet for a moment. "He told someone you'd never leave," Dexter said, "and then you left." "Yes," I said. "Good," he said, quietly but with absolute certainty, the way you'd say something that was so obvious it barely needed saying. "That's the best thing you ever did." I looked at him. Something in my throat tightened. It didn't feel like it at the time. "No," he said, "the best things usually don't." He was looking at me very carefully. "Ryland, I want to say something, and I need you to hear it without immediately building a wall around it." I said nothing, which was probably a kind of answer. "You didn't fail at love. You loved someone who used your love against you. That's not failure. That's being human in the wrong place. The loving part, the way you describe it, the sacrifices, the patience, the staying, that's not a flaw. That's capacity. And you deserve someone who would never, in any universe, use your capacity against you." The bookshop was quiet. Rain had started outside, soft and steady. I looked at my hands for a long time. Then I said, "You're being very careful about whether you're talking about yourself." A beat. Then, "Yes," he said, "I am. Because you're not ready, and I won't push. But I wanted you to know the territory." 3 things happened in December that I did not expect. The first was that Tony showed up in Marinevale. I didn't know until Claudette called me at work, her voice doing the thing it does when she's trying to stay calm and not quite managing it. "There's a man in the shop," she said. "He says he's your ex-husband. He's crying a bit, Ryland." I set down my pen very carefully. "Tell him I'm not coming." "She told him that," she said. "He said he'd wait." "Then he can wait forever," I said. "Don't let him make you uncomfortable, Claudette. If he becomes a problem, call Rudy." Rudy, I had learned, was the pack's unofficial presence of authority, and also the kind of large, quiet man who made problems decide to be somewhere else. She called Rudy. Tony apparently waited for 2 hours and then left. But he was still in the city. He texted me that night. "Ryland, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Petra and the baby, it's complicated, it's a mess, and I know I don't have any right to ask, but I miss you every single day. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I destroyed it, and I know that. Please, just talk to me." I read it twice. Then I typed "no" and blocked the number. My hands were not steady this time. They were shaking. Not from grief, not from longing, but from a white-hot anger that had apparently been quietly building for 3 years and had just decided to remind me it was still there. I called Dexter without planning to. "He's here," I said when he picked up. "Tony, he's in Marinevale. He came here." Dexter's voice was very even. "Where are you?" "Home," I said. "I'm fine. I stopped. My voice had done something I didn't want it to do. "I'm fine," I said again, less convincingly. "I'm coming over," he said. "You don't have to." "Ryland," that voice, steady as a wall. "I'm coming over." He brought food. Not romantic food, just a grocery bag with things to actually cook, which was somehow more comforting than any restaurant would have been. We cooked together in my small kitchen above the bookshop, him handling the actual heat because he noticed quickly that I was shaky and took over without comment, and ate at my small table and didn't talk about Tony immediately. When we did, I told him all of it. The texts, the showing up, the crying, the message about Petra being a mess now, about the baby. Dexter was quiet for a moment. "Do you feel sorry for him?" I thought about that honestly. "No," I said. "I feel
angry that he thinks showing up here crying is something I owe him a response to, like the audacity of it, like he looked at everything he did and decided the solution was just to come find me with tears on his face. Because, Dexter said carefully, that used to work. That landed in my chest. Yeah, I said quietly, because that used to work. He didn't say anything else for a moment. He was looking at me with that steady, specific attention he had. You're not the same person, he said. You know that, right? The person he's coming back for doesn't live here anymore. I looked at the table. My eyes were doing something I hadn't given them permission to do. I know, I said. I know that. It's infuriating that he doesn't. He will, Dexter said quietly. Give it time. The second thing that happened was the pack formal. Every December, apparently, the Marinevale pack held a formal dinner, not a gathering, not a casual thing, an actual formal dinner with a long table and real tableware and people dressed up. I had avoided it the previous 2 years with vague excuses. This year, Quentin and Douglas showed up at my apartment uninvited with a suit bag. It's from a consignment shop on Alderton Street, said Quentin, handing it to me. We guessed your size. They guessed correctly, Douglas told me, already walking past me into my apartment. Dexter mentioned you usually don't come. We're making sure you come this year. Dexter mentioned, I started. He didn't ask us to, Quentin said, reading my face with alarming accuracy. The intervention is entirely our idea. I went. The suit fit perfectly, which Douglas took full credit for. The dinner was long and warm and genuinely lovely. The kind of evening where people are so comfortable with each other that conversations overlap and nobody is performing anything and the laughter is real. After dinner, when people were moving to the main room, he appeared beside me. You stayed, he said. Quentin and Douglas are terrifying, I said. They like you enormously. They don't terrify people they don't like. They just ignore them.
We drifted to a corner of the room, not on purpose, or at least I told myself that, and stood together while the party moved around us and talked for a long time about everything and nothing again, the way we did. His arm was close to mine, not touching, just close, a specific, deliberate distance that acknowledged itself. Ryland, he said at one point, quietly, under the noise of the room. Don't, I said. A pause. I haven't said anything yet, he said. I know what you were going to say, I said, and I'm asking you to give me a little more time. Another pause. Then gently, okay. That was all. Just okay. No pressure, no wounded ego, no pushing, just okay. I stayed until midnight. I had never done that before. The third thing was my brother Melvin. He called on a Wednesday, which was unusual. Melvin and I texted mostly, comfortable in that low-maintenance sibling way. But he called. When I picked up, his voice was strange, and before I could ask what was wrong, he said, Ryland, Tony came to see me. I sat down slowly. He wanted to know where you were, Melvin said. I told him I didn't know, which was a lie, but I needed to tell you. He looked rough, Ryland. Not that you owe him anything, he added quickly, knowing me. I just wanted you to know he came here. He already found me, I said. He came to Marinevale. Silence. Are you okay? Yes, I said. And then, because Melvin was the person I had always been honest with, even when it was uncomfortable, there's someone here. Someone I'm not yet, but possibly. Someone who makes me think possibly. Melvin was very quiet for a moment. Ryland, he said softly, that's the best thing you've said to me in 3 years. Don't make it a big deal, I said. It's a giant deal, he said. I'm making it a giant deal internally. Externally, I'm being very calm. Thank you, I said. January came with a cold snap that made Marinevale feel like something out of a snow globe. I had started going to the weekly pack gatherings regularly by then, not reluctantly, not as an obligation, but because I actually wanted to. Because Nelson would save me the chair nearest the best heater, because Quentin and Douglas would immediately rope me into whatever argument they were having, because Rudy would nod at me in a way that felt, from Rudy, like a bear hug. And because Dexter would always be there, and being in a room with Dexter had started to feel like something my body recognized as good before my brain had a chance to weigh in. We hadn't spoken about what he'd almost said at the formal. We simply continued. The texts, the bookshop, the occasional dinner.
but there was something in it now that hadn't been there before. A warmth that had stopped pretending to be casual, a comfort that had stopped needing explanation. One afternoon, we were walking back from a PAC meeting through the park on Glenmore Lane. It was the kind of cold day where the sky is that specific pale blue and everything is very still. And Dexter said, out of nowhere, "Tell me something you've never told anyone." I glanced at him. That's a big ask for a park walk. "Humor me," he said. I thought about it honestly. "When I left Tony," I said, "I packed 2 suitcases. I left a lot of things on purpose." I paused. Most of it was fine to leave. Furniture, dishes, books I could replace. But I left my grandmother's quilt. I forgot it. It's the only thing I've ever genuinely grieved from that house. Not him, not the marriage, the quilt. He was quiet for a moment. What did it look like? I almost smiled. Of all the follow-up questions, that one. Blue and white, patchwork. She made it when I was born, apparently. I never met her. We walked for a little while. Then he said, "My grandmother left me a ring I've never worn because I'm afraid of losing it." I looked at him. "So I carry it," he said simply, "in my pocket every day." He glanced at me. "Something precious you're afraid to lose. You figure out a way to keep it close." I looked away before he could see whatever was on my face, but I reached over, without fully deciding to, and let the back of my hand brush against the back of his as we walked. He turned his hand over. His fingers closed around mine, just briefly, maybe 5 seconds, and then we both let go, and kept walking, and didn't say anything about it. But I felt it for the rest of the day. Warm and terrifying and real. It was Nelson who told me, without meaning to cause a crisis.
He nodded slowly, like that made complete sense, like he had known this was coming and had been patient with it all along. "Ryland," he said, "I'm not going to make you a promise that there's no risk. I'm not going to tell you I'm perfect or that this will be easy or that you'll never feel scared again. That would be a lie, and you deserve better than beautiful lies." He leaned forward slightly. "What I can tell you is that I will never, in any version of this, treat your love like it's something I can afford to waste. I have seen what it costs you to love something. I would never—" He stopped. His jaw was working slightly. "I would never treat it like something I could count on just having. I would earn it every day. That's not a romantic speech. That's just what I believe love actually is." The room was very quiet. I thought about the quilt I had left behind, about the ring in his pocket, about the things you find ways to keep close because losing them is unthinkable. "I think," I said slowly, "that I've been using distance as a proof of strength, like if I can stay far enough away from wanting something, that means I'm strong. But I think actually—" My voice was soft and unsteady, and I let it be. "I think actually the strong thing is to want it anyway." He didn't move. He was watching me very carefully. "I'm not all the way healed," I said. "I want to be honest about that. I have days where the anger is still right there. I have moments where I hear a laugh I don't recognize and I go cold from the inside. I'm not a finished thing." "Neither am I," he said. "Okay. Then maybe we just—" I stopped, tried again. "Maybe this is what it looks like. 2 people who got broken at different times and put themselves back together and have all these seams that show. And maybe that's not a problem to solve first. Maybe that's just who we are, and we start from here." He was very still for a moment. Then quietly, "Yes," he said, "that's exactly what I think." We stayed up until almost 3 in the morning talking, and when I finally left to walk home through the cold winter night, I felt not repaired, not like the hard parts were gone, but like something that had been locked for a very long time had quietly, finally, turned. Spring came. Melvin came to visit and met Dexter and spent the entire visit pretending not to be delighted in the most transparent way. Dexter won him over immediately with a combination of sincerity and knowing how to grill.
and I watched them argue cheerfully about something at the dinner table and felt a warmth in my chest so big and steady it almost frightened me. Tony texted one more time from a new number in March. "I just want you to know I understand now what I had. I hope you're happy, Ryland. You deserved better than me." I read it twice. I didn't feel relief or grief or victory. I felt done, finished, like a sentence that had ended properly. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I told Dexter about it. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Does it change anything for you?" "No," I said, and surprised myself with how certain that was. "It doesn't change anything." He nodded like he'd thought as much and reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, gentle, unhurried, the way he did everything, and we went back to what we were doing. The thing about healing is that it doesn't announce itself. You don't wake up one day and feel a click, some final piece settling in. It happens the way light comes in the morning, so gradually you can't point to the exact moment, just notice you can see. I noticed it in April, on a Friday, unremarkable in every way. I was at my desk at work, and the sun was coming through the window at that specific late afternoon angle that turns everything golden. I was in the middle of something very boring involving quarterly projections, and I stopped, just for a second, and thought, I am happy. Right now, in this ordinary moment, I am genuinely happy. Not performing happiness or managing myself carefully enough that the absence of pain felt like peace. Actually, fully, quietly happy. I sat with that for a moment. Then I sent Dexter a text that said, "I think I'm okay, like actually okay." He sent back, "I know, I've been watching it happen." I sent, "That's sweet or slightly creepy." He sent, "Both. You're welcome."
I laughed out loud at my desk and got 3 looks from colleagues and did not care even a little. The PAC summer gathering happened in June, a big, sprawling afternoon into evening event in the park behind Nelson's property, with tables of food and the twins arguing about the playlist and Rudy falling asleep in a lawn chair and waking up outraged about it. Dexter, because he was himself, had organized an extremely serious debate competition about something completely trivial that turned into the funniest thing I had ever watched in my life. Late in the evening, when the sky had gone that deep purple pink of midsummer twilight, I found him standing at the edge of the gathering, watching his people, and I went and stood beside him the way I had started to do, without announcement, without asking permission, just because he was where I wanted to be. He looked at me sideways. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he said. We stood there for a moment, listening to Nelson trying to teach someone a card game at the wrong volume. "Ryland," Dexter said. "Mm-hmm," I said. "I love you," he said, simply, quietly, like a statement of fact, certain the way he was certain about things, without performance or grandeur. "I thought you should know. I'm not asking you to say it back right now. I just wanted to stop not saying it." The twilight sat around us. The party continued behind us. I looked at the sky for a moment, at that pink and purple and the first star appearing in the east. Then I turned to look at him. "I love you," I said. "I've known for a while. I was waiting until it didn't scare me as much." He looked at me. Something in his face was so open and so real that I had to breathe through it. "Does it still scare you?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "but not enough to stop." He reached out and his hand closed around mine, not briefly this time, not for 5 seconds and then letting go. He held on, and I held back, and we stood there while the summer evening folded around us, and our pack made noise behind us, and the star in the east was joined by another, then too many to count. This was not a perfect ending. There would be hard days still. There would be grief that resurfaced without warning, and fear that needed managing, and mornings when the old wounds made themselves known. There would be work to do, always. But there was also this, his hand and mine, and the choosing, the conscious, deliberate, brave act of choosing despite the scars. I had believed in soulmates once, the easy kind,
the destined kind, the kind that didn't require anything from you because it was just meant to be. I didn't believe in that anymore. What I believed in now was something harder and more real. Two people who had been broken and rebuilt, who chose each other with full knowledge of the risk, who said, "I see you and I'm staying," not because fate demanded it, but because they meant it. That was better, messier and scarier, and so much better. Liked this story? We post new stories every week, so hit subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss one. And drop a comment below. We want to know which moment hit you hardest. And if you're sharing this with a friend, we are not mad about it at all.